Mike McClelland coming to you from Lake Lanier, just outside Atlanta, Georgia. Basically here the end of April. I mean, it's kind of a weird time of the year to be here. I mean, the fish are in all phases. You've still got some pre-spawn fish, some spawning fish, and there's even some fish that are already done, completely post-spawn, starting to move back out on these points. But we're here this week with Tackle Warehouse. We're going to be talking about the McStick 110 and the McStick 95, and you couldn't ask for a better time of the year to get out and put both of these baits to work. So let's get on with it. And like I said, we're here at Lanier, and basically these fish are in all phases, and the biggest thing that you really got to pay attention to is you got to stay close to the spawning type areas. I mean, that's the whole key right now, is putting yourself in position to catch the pre-spawn fish that are coming in, the fish that are actually spawning a little bit deeper in some of these spawning type pockets. And then also, you know, you got to keep into consideration the fish that are done spawning, starting to transition back out. You know, you also generally this time of the year, you're going to get a shad spawn. You're going to have shad spawning, you know, right up on these clay bars and these clay points. And really the key, in my opinion, is the real shallow flat clay points, the tapering points, and the ones that have deep water close. So that's the biggest thing that I'm going to look for. Water temperatures ranging anywhere from about 65 to 72 degrees. And like I said, you just got fish in all phases. So the key is just really covering as much water as you possibly can. When it comes to looking for the pre-spawn fish, you know, this time of year, I mean, you've still got a lot of fish, like I said, in all phases. But when I'm looking for the pre-spawners, I'm going to really focus my attention to the secondary points. We're back in a creek. You've got a lot of good secondary points that are leading back into these spawning pockets. And really my key bait in that situation is going to be a McStick 110. The reason for that is the 110 is built to suspend. It's built to get to that prime depth. You know, we're talking a bait that can be fished 4 to 8 foot deep. You can stop the bait, let it set dead still, and those pre-spawners that are just starting to move in, that are just starting to, you know, get to that point, I mean, something like that is going to get their attention a lot better than a bait that's constantly moving. So the 110 is definitely my choice. When it comes to the way to fish this bait, a lot of people have a lot of different methods, but I really like to fish the bait a lot slower than a lot of people. So let's take a look and see what we can do with it. You know, when it comes to fishing the bait, I mean, I like to make a really long cast. The first thing I want to do is just wind the bait down. I want to achieve the depth that I want that bait to get to as quick as I can. So I'm going to wind that bait down, and typically I always just pause it after I wind it down. Usually pull it a couple times after I pause it just to help get it down a little bit farther. And then I really like to milk the bait. I mean, I'll twitch it along a couple times and make myself just sit there and count and let that bait set as really as long as I can stand to let it set until I figure out what the fish want. Like I said, these fish are, you know, they're moving up, they're still feeding a little bit, but really they got spawning on their mind. But these are the big ones, and these are the ones that are gonna help you really add your weight up. The post spawners this time of the year just aren't gonna weigh anything, so that's the reason I like the 110 in this situation. The 95, once I figure out the fish are really starting to move up into the pockets, that's when the 95 is really gonna come into play. When I just get on the bank, cover a lot of water, trying to find active fish or fish that might actually be on beds, that's when I'm going to go to the 95. But like I said, a long cast is the key. Generally, I don't ever start jerking as soon as the bait hits the water. I mean, I want to wind it down, pull it, and then just start twitching it real easy. Probably one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people doing is just they get impatient. You know, they can't stand to let the bait sit there longer than 5, 6, 7 seconds. And you know, for me, there's a lot of times I just got to make myself break down and just count. You know, count to 15, count to 20 before you move that bait. I'll twitch it a little bit, and then a lot of times I'll pull it 3 or 4 feet just to, you know, get a little more action, a little more interest. If you've got one sitting there looking at it that can't commit, a lot of times that'll make him follow it up a little bit more. And then the next time you pop it, I mean, a lot of times that's when they get it. You know, I'm trying to catch some of these pre-spawners on these secondary points, but I've kind of worked myself back into a spawning area. I'm gonna fish this last little secondary point that sticks out right here. And if I don't get bit here, I'm going to pick up a 95 and just really try to cover some water through this little spawning area and see if we can get something a little more aggressive, something that's really already up there shallow, ready to feed to catch on. biggest difference in the 95 and the 110 is the 95 is built to fish a lot shallower. The 110, like I said, it's a 4 to 8 foot bait pretty easy. The 95 is built to fish, you know, 1 to 3, 4 foot deep. You can cover a lot of water. I want to fish this bait a lot faster, put a lot more action in it. So typically, you know, I'm going to wind that bait down just like I do the 110, but then I'm going to work it a lot harder for most of the situations. Really, these fish are, you know, they're committed, they're already shallow. They're doing two things up here. They're either spawning, or they're up here garden fry, or they're actually up here feeding on spawning shad this time of the year. So the McStick 95 is just a great way to cover water and try to catch some fish. When it comes to throwing a McStick 95, there's a lot of things you need to take into consideration. Your rod, your reel, your line, and line to me is probably one of the most critical things. Whenever I'm throwing a 95, I'm generally throwing it a lot shallower. I'm trying to get a lot of action out of the bait, so I'll throw this bait either on the Sunline Sniper Fluorocarbon or Sunline Supernatural. When it comes to weight of the line, that's going to depend on how deep I want the bait to go. The shallower I want to keep the bait, the heavier the line. So a lot of times I'll use 14, 16 pound, either Supernatural Monofilament or Sniper Fluorocarbon. When it comes to the reel, this time of the year, the fish are getting a lot more aggressive. They're up chasing. I want a reel that I can really pick up a lot of line. I can catch up with the fish. So I'm going to throw a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio reel, and the rod is super important. I want a 6 foot 8 rod up to a 7 footer. But the key thing about the rod is you want a rod that's got the backbone to throw the bait, but you want a rod that's got a lot of tip, real soft tip. But as you can see, that rod's got plenty of backbone to handle the fish once I get him hooked. Those are really the key attributes to throwing a McStick 95. When it comes to throwing the 110, there's really a lot of things that are gonna change, but there's some things that are gonna stay the same. The rod is essentially going to be the same rod. I mean, it's going to be the Falcon 6/8 Signature Series McStick rod. And that's what I throw most all of my stick baits on, is this new Microguide Signature Series McStick rod. The reel in this situation could vary a little bit. As you get into this really phase where the fish are in all phases, I'm going to step it up to either a Tour Edition 6:3 to 1 or a Tour Edition 6:3 Smoke. And if it's colder, that's when I'm going to slow down and I want to go to that 5 to 1 gear ratio reel. But fishing line is another real big deal when you're throwing the 110. Like I said, I want this bait to suspend more, so I'm always going to throw this 110 in that pre-spawn mode. When those fish are out on the points, I'm going to throw it on 10 to 16 pound Sunline Supernatural Monofilament, and typically I always like to throw the clear. So next time you go fishing, remember the things that I do to catch more fish on a stick bait, and every one of these products is available at tacklewarehouse.com.